Engeba Sojola here. In this video, we'll be discussing the geopolitics and the tensions that we find over Taiwan, right? So basically, I want to give a brief understanding on how I have come to understand Taiwan, right? Now, in 1945, right, until 1949, there was a civil war in China, right? This civil war was between the communists, right, and the nationalists, right? Now, the communists managed to push out the nationalists, right, and win the war, basically to defeat the nationalists. The nationalists decided to flee to Taiwan, right? A small landmass that you find nearly about 200 kilometers away from the mainland of China, right? So they flee there, right? They decide to find refuge there. They ended up setting up a nationalist government that works under democratic principles to a point where they even have a uh, multi-party democracy, right? Now, let me use a South African example, right? Let's say a war starts between the South African Communist Party, right, and the African Nationalist Program or African National Congress, right, ANC, right? And the South African Communist Party wins the war, right? And then the ANC flees to Robben Island, right? ANC flees to Robben Island, decides to set up its own government with a multi-party democracy and yada, 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 and all of that, right? Now, when the Communist Party remains in the mainland of South Africa, they turn the state into basically a communist state, right? Which has socialist values, right? This is what I have come to understand. Even though the African National Congress, the nationalists, fled to a smaller island off the coast of the mainland, right? Doesn't mean that this is their country now, right? So there is no way nationalists will lose a war in the mainland of South Africa and then they go to Robben Island and then they declare that an independent country, right? So this is my understanding of the situation with Taiwan, right? There was a war on mainland. The communists won the war. The nationalists fled the mainland and went to Taiwan, right? They started to set up a government, right, with that is democratic in nature and nationalistic in identity, right? So I don't agree when they say that they can declare, right, the country or the landmass or the province of Taiwan as an independent country because of the reasons that I have mentioned. Now, in 1971, the US and the West, right, came to recognize China Beijing, as the main partner they need to deal with when it comes to Asia matters, right? Now, they recognize them under a principle which is known as the One China Principle. And in 1992, an agreement, or rather a consensus in regards to this One China principle was released. And the statement says that the mainland and Taiwan belong to one and the same China, cross strait, not a state by state relationship, but a country, one country with two systems. So in 1992, they came to an understanding that no, China and Taiwan are one country, right? But they use two different systems, right? The first system used by the mainland is a communist socialist one, and the system used by Taiwan is a democratic and nationalistic one, right? So They came to an agreement in 1992 which actually states this, right? But now the tensions are also increasing again because of a number of reasons. Now, with the coming into the presidency in China of Xi Jinping, right, a number of projects were introduced, right? The first main one was the Belt and Road Initiative, right? And he had two other interesting projects. Number one, the reunification of Taiwan and the reunification of Hong Kong. Now, just a brief look at the history of Hong Kong, right? Now, China lost Hong Kong to Britain over the Opium Wars, right? Which occurred quite far back, right? I think it's about 156 years, right? When you count until 1997, when Hong Kong was handed over by Britain to China, right? But Hong Kong was only reintegrated into the Chinese economic system and political system in 2014, right? And a huge mess actually happened there. There were protests which were known as the umbrella protests, right? They came up, this word or this name came up because the protesters were using umbrellas to protect themselves from um, uh, tear gas and gas tanks from the police, right? So that's why it was called the Umbrella Revolution, which tend to fight for self-determination and all of that until they were absorbed into the Chinese political system, right? I think around 2014, 2015, right? So it the first unification was very successful, right? Which was on Hong Kong, right? Now Xi Jinping sets his sight on Taiwan, reunifying Taiwan. He's not looking to uh, fight, right, for Taiwan using guns and all of that. He would prefer a peaceful transition like Hong Kong. But if needs be, he's ready with all his missiles and soldiers and jets, you see, and military men, right? So another thing I can mention about the tensions which occurred over Taiwan was the visitation of Nancy Pelosi in August of 2022, right? When Nancy Pelosi came visited Taiwan, they were not really happy with that visit, and they started a number of military exercises, from shooting long range missiles over Taiwan to sending about 68 jets to just confuse the air defense system of Taiwan, right? Just to show the displeasure they had with the visiting of Nancy Pelosi in Taiwan. They also cut meetings, right, and phone calls, and they also stopped certain projects they were working on in regards to the climate change issue. So Taiwan is a very, what can I say, touchy issue, which has the possibility of actually leading to Third World War, right? It is believed that a war will happen in this part of the world, right, Taiwan, around 2027, 2028, when the US decides to attack China, right? Or when the US decides to start a war between itself and China, right, in regards to this issue. So that's just a briefing of what I have come to understand with the tensions over the Taiwan Strait. Thank you.